my wife up here as well. So Daniel asked that we come and we share. And can this mic be on for her? And I'll just kind of stand off to the side so we don't have the... Does that work? Is that okay? Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure how everybody's sound system works. So anyway, forgive me in advance. But this is my wife, Debbie. And she was unfortunate enough to be tricked into marrying me 11 years ago. But anyway, we just kind of wanted to... Daniel had asked we come and share our testimony of how God led us to the mission field, because I think every missionary story is a little different. It's a little unique how God draws people, and so we just kind of wanted to share our story with you. And as I said before, this is Debbie, I'm Cole. We're missionary appointees to Lima, Peru, and we're with ABWE.
Yep. We have 4 kids. Yes. Is that okay? Can everybody hear me? Okay. I don't talk as loud as him, but I am loud. We have 4 kids. Liam is 6, and he's going to sit quietly back there this whole time. Layla is 3, and then we're in the process of adopting a couple of kiddos from the foster care system. Tate is 1, and his sister is 10 months. So our home church is not far from here. It's Living Waters Fellowship in South Des Moines. We've been members there for the last 11 years.
Almost 12, actually.
Almost 12,
so, yeah. So, we're excited about what God is calling us to do in South America, but our story starts really as we both grew up in Christian homes, and we were both saved at an early age. I was saved when I was 5, and I think, Debbie, you were 5 as well. And when I turned, I was about 18 years old, and I really sensed that God was leading me towards ministry, mission specifically, and so I did what every 18-year-old does. You got to head off to Bible college then if you're going to go to ministry, and so I did that. And but in that time frame, I didn't want to go all the way through 4 years of Bible college and focus on missions and then find out that I did not want to be a missionary. And so I contacted a missionary friend of our families who, Saylorville is the sending church, and some of you guys might know who John and Bev Leonard are. They're Baptist Mid-Missions missionaries. And so I contacted, Oh, great. I had no idea the family relation, so that's fantastic. So, I knew she was a Fincham. I'm not sure why I didn't put that together. But anyhow, so I contacted John and Bev, and John, he's pretty straightforward and doesn't have time to beat around the bush. And he said, sure, you can come down with us. We're going to be going back from furlough in the fall of 2005, and we'd like you to come down for 6 to 9 months. You save up X amount of dollars and get your visa and all that stuff. And so I set out to go with John, and so my first year of college was the 2004-2005 season, and then for my sophomore year of college, I was planning on spending it with John, not as like a collegiate level, but just to go serve in Brazil. And so in the spring of 2005, I got a call from my dad, actually. He said, hey, you're not going to believe this, John has been shot. And that drastically changed my personal direction, and so I was a little lost, and is what I was going to do, but I just continued on with my coursework.
You went off track.
Sorry, I'm right here.
I'm going to back up. He went way ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's okay. So, as Cole said, we grew up in a Christian home, and as I became an adult, I'm going to back up in my life because he went way ahead, but and as I became an adult, I knew I wanted to marry someone who loved Jesus, and that was serving the Lord. I didn't care if he was a pastor or a plumber. I just wanted him to be growing in the Lord and faithfully serving the Lord, and that was my heart and my hope for finding a husband if that's what the Lord had for me. So Cole and I, we met in college, and I had heard he was looking for a long-term missions program, and I had applied for the Ariba program, which your pastor, I'm sure, has mentioned that many times. It's a year-long immersion program. So I told Cole about this. I had met him at college. I said, you should do this. It sounds like a neat program. Long story short, he ended up going. I ended up staying. But the 4 months leading up to his going, we began dating, which is also a funny story I'd love to share with you at another time, because I didn't really like him a whole lot. So The Lord totally worked in both of our hearts, because he didn't like me a whole lot either.
Yeah,
Just
we
to
were
be honest.
acquaintances when I was introduced to the Ariba program, and so I signed up thinking, Peru's not Brazil, it's not exactly my target, but it is a long-term missions program, and I do wanna see what it's like to be on the field, and so I went, and God used that just to grow us both through that year.
Yep. Yep. After Cole returned from Peru, he was a completely different person, and so was I. And the Lord was just faithful to help us move from the FaceTime relationship that we had to the face-to-face relationship that we began when he came home. And he continued to just grow us closer as
Yeah.
a couple.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, upon arriving back in the States, like she said, we were different people. I was very weird. I went through what's called reverse culture shock. For those of you who've ever spent any length of time overseas, basically, you go to a culture as an American, and you're in it long enough that you kind of become acclimated and start acting like the culture around you in the other country. But then when you come back, you're the weird person because you're like, why is that person cutting in line and cutting people off in traffic and, and just randomly outbursting in Spanish at random points in time? You're like, what's wrong with this person? So she was very gracious to say I was different. I was really strange. And so, but upon arriving back in the States, I really had a heart for missions. I had a heart for the gospel, and I desired strongly. I knew it was going to take some time to get to the mission field because I had to complete coursework and all this stuff. And so I wanted to get plugged into evangelism, outreach, discipleship type of ministry at my home church, which was Saylorville Church up in Saylor Township. And so I couldn't get connected the way I wanted to. I was working night shift, and just my schedule was all over the place. And a man there, a godly guy that was at Saylorville at the time, his name is Chuck DeClean, he said, hey, I'd like to introduce you to this guy. His name is Josh Daggett, and he's just getting ready to plant a church in South Des Moines, and I think you should go serve with him. And so he introduced Debbie and I to Josh.
Mm-hmm. So in the summer of 2008, sorry, you probably can't hear me. Summer of 2008, as a dating couple, our pastor was crazy to let a dating couple come, but he did it anyways. We joined the Living Waters church plant as core group members, and it was a crazy year. If any of you have ever participated in a church plant, you do everything. The core group of people does everything, and so we kind of did everything within that first year, and we committed to a year of our time, talent, and treasure with the church plant, and in that year, we changed churches. We came from Saylorville over to the church plant. We got engaged. Cole finished his coursework at Bible College. We were married, and then with our vision set to go to the mission field, we decided we would be good missionaries. It was our understanding we needed to be debt-free, so we spent the first few months of our marriage saving our pennies, living very differently from the people around us so that we could pay off the college debt, and the Lord blessed us in that, and we were able to pay that off, and we were super excited to start our pre-field ministry that we'd set out to do.
Yeah, so we were 23, fresh out of Bible college. We knew, I knew everything, and we were just we were excited to start pre-field ministry. We, as Debbie said, we paid off our college debt. We did rice and beans and worked crazy amounts of overtime, and then right at the end of that, Debbie and I, we got it done. We were so excited to be debt-free, and we decided to go on this 2-week vacation to Lima because I wanted to take Debbie to where I had served as an intern and just introduce her to all my friends and stuff. And I thought that'll be the last time I am ever on Peruvian soil. I want to take my young wife, and we're going to go. And so we did that, and we had a great time. And Debbie, you actually really liked the city from what I remember. I mean, she really enjoyed the city. And so, but we still had our eyes very much focused on Brazil. John was heading back to the field at the time, and he was very excited about us possibly coming and working with him. And so we approached our home church, and we said, hey, we are ready to get going on this pre-field ministry thing. And they're like, great, there's a process, so we'll get back with you in a few weeks. And I was like, okay. So a couple weeks go by, and I give one of our pastors a call, which when I say our pastors, I'm talking about Saylorville Church. We were still a church plant. We weren't fully incorporated at Living Waters yet. And so I called them, and they said, hey, you're going to need to go talk to your pastors about this. And I was like, well, I am talking to my pastors. And they're like, no. Like at the church plant, you need to go talk with Pastor Josh and Pastor Greg. And so we did that, and we're like, okay, what's going on? And they, they were very gracious to us, but they said, we love you guys. It's never a good thing when your pastor starts off with, hey, we love you guys, but, so I don't know if that's how you start out, Pastor Daniel, but when you're about to break a hard word, you got to like, I love you, but there's this thing. And so they said, hey, we love you guys. You're young and you're zealous and you're serving faithfully, but you're also like really ill-equipped and have really poor leadership skills, and you're immature and arrogant, and we just feel like you need to grow a lot before you go anywhere. And so my 23-year-old know-it-all self was just like crushed, like I was just crushed because I had like from 18 to 23, it's 5 years of prepping to go to the mission field only to be told no. And yeah, so that was where we were. We sat flat, and it was really hard for us to walk through.
Yep. We were really lost after that. We kind of had tunnel vision for the mission field and weren't sure what to do. And so we sat down with just some of the godly people in our life to seek counsel and just asked them, what should we do? Like, we had this plan, and, our pastor said, don't go. We talked to our pastors about it, obviously.
Our super mature 27-year-old pastor told us that we were too young and immature to go. So
it was hard to watch the vision that Cole had specifically go up in flames, and we had these big plans. But after seeking the Lord in counsel, and we just spent a lot of time praying together, and the counsel that was given to us was just to lean in where we were at serving. And so we leaned in for almost 12 years.
Almost 12 years now. So for us, when they said, hey, you just need to lean into where you're serving right now, it's kind of an open-ended invite to nothing. And so we weren't really sure what that meant, so we just started serving where we were, And so what does that look like in a church plant? Well, it looks like all sorts of things in a church plant. We still, to this day, we have mobile church. So it's set up, tear down every Sunday, which is just a blast, as you can imagine. So we are a church of like jeans and t-shirts all the time because there's this constant setup, tear down that goes on. And, what did it look like? It looked like being involved in, worship teams and holding babies in nursery and visiting sick people in our community and reaching and, leading, helping with VBS and starting a youth group. And we started a Spanish ministry and all this stuff over the years. And it just looked like a lot of normal stuff, like what normal Christians are supposed to do and share the gospel with your neighbors. And we bought a house in the community. And somewhere in the middle of all of that leaning in, the conversation shifted. It wasn't so much let's lean in so that we can see when God will lead us to the mission field. It became very clear to us, so this has been, 6-7 years ago, it became really clear to us, like, this was our mission field. Like, we lived in South Des Moines, and there was a lot of needs. And, I remember looking at Debbie one night after like, halfway through the first year of starting the youth group at our church, and it went from, like, no kids to a lot of kids, like, really quick, and kids are getting saved and trusting Christ and walking in newness of life, and we were just, like, so blessed by that. And we were like, man, like, I think this is our mission field. Like, I think this is exactly where God wanted us the whole time. And so, and we became very content with our life. We set roots, started a couple of businesses in this community, and just thought, you know what? We'll just be lay people. Like, that's good. God's using us right where we are. So, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else on that, but that's pretty much it, right?
I would just echo. I would echo what you were saying. Like, we just found a passion with where the Lord had us, and our hearts have been content, happy. We just see the Lord's hand on the last few years and His growth in our life, and we're thankful for that. And we have our own 2 children and our adoptive children that we're in process of adopting, and we would never have had that opportunity with them had we had a different path. So we just see the Lord's hand on the last almost 12 years. I'm having a hard time saying that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, so God's hand was just really there, and He used that time to grow us.
Yeah.
You know, it's I'm finding out now that it's not. We went out to ABWE's new missionary orientation, which is where, like, they kind of gather in all the people, and they're like, okay, if you're going to be a missionary, here's your crash course into what you need to know, and they try to equip us. And what I found is, as we were sitting among these people, like, almost there was a few people that had come out of, like, professional vocational ministry spots. There's a few of those, but most of the people were either fresh out of college or just God had kind of moved in some way, but none of them had an opportunity to serve, like, on the front lines of a brand new church plant for any duration of time, to see what it looked like from day one to, you know, almost year 12. And so we, looking back, we really see God's hand in just kind of equipping us and to serve in the work of church planting, which is what we're intending on being a part of. And so it was really cool just to see how God raised us up. And so, you know, for me, I feel very akin to like Moses. When I was reading in my devotions earlier this year, I was reading about Moses and how God had, like, placed it on his heart to serve the people of Israel, even though he was raised as the daughter of Pharaoh, and yet he did not want to be Egyptian. He was an Israelite, and so when he was about 40 years old, he decides that of his own strength and of his own zeal and of his own intelligence, of his own education, he's just going to go try to save the people of Israel. And so he kills the Egyptian. For those of you guys who are Old Testament scholars, he kills this Egyptian, and then that totally backfires, and he ends up running for his life. And then God kind of moves him out to the backside of a desert and has him shepherd sheep in the wilderness for 40 more years. And he teaches Moses through that time how to shepherd sheep, and then brings Moses back to shepherd his people the way he desired them to be shepherded out of Egypt. And I was like, man, I'm glad God didn't operate in 40-year increments with me, because I don't think I'd last to 120. But what I can tell you is that I feel very akin to that. Like, at 23, I didn't know anything, but I was excited about serving the Lord. And now 11, almost 12 years later, we're standing in front of you as just really changed people that God has taken through a process on the backside of Des Moines to teach how to serve and how to minister effectively to people, and just how to have a heart for people that goes beyond our own personal zeal. And so it's really cool. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Lima as well. Lima's just a small town. Huh?
Did you want to talk about your friends that challenged you to quit?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So how did I get here? Okay, so a year ago, a couple of guys that I had discipled, one of them for 9 years, one of them for 7 years. You know, these guys started out as, like, new believers. They were my project children, and these guys have become my best friends. Both of them have a mind for theology, a heart for God, and we still meet pretty regularly. And last, was it January or February? Last February, we go out, you know, probably every other week, and they said, hey, we want to talk to you. And, you know, at the time I had a construction business that was going really strong, and it was growing, and had a property management business going as well. And then I'm a licensed real estate agent on top of that. And so we kind of do all this real estate stuff, and was kind of the business that I'd been involved in for the last almost decade. And they said, hey, you know, your businesses are going really good. And then your ministry at church with the Hispanic ministry and the youth and all that stuff, that's going really good too. But we think you should just quit your business. And I was like, what? And it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, are you kidding me right now? And they said, yeah, we love you. We just think you're doing too much. And we think you need to just either do ministry or do business. But, like, you need to torque it back a little bit, because you're going to get burnt out. And I'm not one to torque anything back. I like to ramp things up and go. And but anyway, that was hard, and that started a conversation with Debbie and I that led to prayer and fasting and just asking that God would direct us. And so as we began to fast, and we just kind of kept it between those two friends, Debbie and I, and then our pastor. And we asked him, like, hey, just keep that tight to the vest. We don't really want to advertise anything. We're just going to pray and ask that God show us if this is, like, of him, if this advice is of him, or if this is just, like, a couple of friends just, you know, trying to encourage me. When, you know, like, sometimes friends encourage you to do stupid things. And so I was like, well, maybe that's what this is. And so we began to pray. And I got a call we got a call a couple weeks later from a friend of Debbie's, and they said, hey, come grill with us. And so we're like, great, we'll go out and grill with you guys. And out in Perry, Iowa. So we go out to grill, and it turns out they did not invite us out just to grill. So we're grilling out, and they said they're telling us all about their community, Perry, and just there is a Baptist church out there, but it's really struggling, and there'd been like a lot of infighting over the years, and just some situations that they had seen growing up in that community and having been part of that church. And they said, hey, we really, really, really desire to see a new church planted in Perry. And I was like, that's great. I'll like pray with you guys that, God would bring somebody along to plant the church. And I was thinking, hey, maybe God's calling you to plant the church. And they're like, actually, we wanted to ask you if you would come here and plant that church. And I was like, whoa, like, you guys know, I'm a contractor, I'm a realtor, like, I'm not a church. They're like, no, we really think that God could use you here. And I was like, okay. And for the first time, I gave them the spiritual answer, but I meant it. The spiritual answer that's like, hey, I'll write that down, I'll pray about that, and then I'll let you know. Like, I think a lot of times we as Christians say that and don't really mean it. We're like, I'm not doing that. But I meant it that time. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll pray about it. And then a few days later, we got a phone call from a church in southern Iowa, and they had said, hey, you filled for your pastor about a month ago. I was like, yeah. What can I do for you? And they said, well, hey, we want you to come candidate as a senior pastor of our church. And I was like, really? And I wrote it down. I said, well, I'll pray about that, and I'll write it down. I said, I had 2 things on my list. And then I got a call about a week later from another church that was looking to do a church revitalization project on the north side of Des Moines. And they met with me, and they're like, hey, we want you to consider doing something here. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll write that down. And over the next 3 weeks, I had several phone calls, and it was just God's way of confirming, like, hey, here's a bunch of opportunities that I want you to consider. And one of those opportunities was Steve Frericks. He called me from South America. Our church is his sending church. It wasn't previously, but it is now. And Steve, he said, hey, I could really use a partner in ministry down here, at least for a season. Would you and Debbie consider coming? And I said, you know what, Steve, believe it or not, I'm going to write that on my list, and I'm going to pray about it. And God led us that direction out of much prayer, much fasting, much seeking counsel. It was like God just kind of brought back this whole heart for missions back up out of us that had been, sitting on the sidelines the last decade plus. And so, anyway, so God really led that way. But anyway, that's probably enough about our story. God's really good. I'll just say that. So
really excited about what's going on in Lima, though. Having just got back, I can honestly say that with great anticipation.
We spent 2 weeks there recently.
Yes, we just got back. Lima is a city of over 10 million people, less than 1/3 gospel influence per capita than the city of Des Moines.
So if you think of the city of Des Moines, I did a little, before we left, I looked up how many gospel-centered churches there are right here in the city of Des Moines. Like, just not Windsor Heights, not West Des Moines, not, all these surrounding, but like just the city of Des Moines. And there's about 52 to 55, and I didn't count just the Baptists. I counted people that like had a theological mind that love Jesus, that are reaching people for Christ. And so there's about 53 in that demographic with about 400,000 people. So if you look at Lima, it is split into 49 different districts that make up the city of Lima. They're all kind of mashed together, and each district has about 200,000 to 300,000 people in it. So about each one is almost the size of Des Moines, and the most reached districts have maybe 10 or 12 churches to reach that 300,000 to 300,000 mark. So it's really less than 1/3 of the influence for the gospel in that city for the amount of people that are there. So.
Sorry, we're kind of everywhere tonight.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Do you just want to tell?
Oh yeah, so let's talk a little bit about obviously the needs are great with that many people. One of the cultural things that you'll learn, and Pastor Daniel, you might have even mentioned this before, but there's this idea that kind of is rooted and ingrained in the entirety of the culture called machismo. Okay, you guys might have heard that phrase before, or like machoism is how we would translate that, which has to do with this. Basically, and the government even enforces this to a degree, is that men in this culture, they are expected to provide food and shelter for their family, and that's about it. So it's actually completely acceptable by a lot of, not obviously Christian standards, but by the cultural standards that, hey, to be a good dad, you need to put food on the table and a roof over your family's head. Outside of that, you don't have a lot of obligation. So you could be an alcoholic, and people might not like that, but it's okay. It's not that big a deal. You go home and abuse your wife, and that's just pretty common, to be honest with you. A recent survey that was done by the university there in Lima, they surveyed nearly 1 million people and found out that just over 50% of households reported spousal abuse. There's a ton of single mom pregnancies and then just single moms. Teenage pregnancy is rampant. Though abortion is illegal in the country, it happens regularly. And there is just a huge amount of just deterioration within the family as a whole because of it.
There's extreme poverty and extreme wealth there. It seems like the wealth are very flaunting with their money, and then you see the impoverished people that are in a whole different demographic, and it creates an environment of just a lot of needs.
And kind of a class war struggle.
Huge class war, yeah. Something I was excited to see when I went down there was just how Christ is breaking through the class war that's going on with them, to see the people, the mountain people, in communion of believers with the wealthy people, and that is something only the Lord can do, because that's not something culturally they do. So that is kind of an uphill battle with some of when you're doing church planting in Lima, but it's something we're excited to see that's happening, and we're excited to jump into discipleship and continue that as well. So.
Yeah, and as far as the ministry that we're going to be involved in, it's a lot of, in some ways it's drastically different than here because of things like transportation. Like public transportation is a big deal because of the congestion and the food's different, and of course the atmosphere is different. It's the second biggest city in the world that's built on a desert, second only to Cairo, Egypt. And what's crazy is that Cairo is actually bigger than Lima, but they have the same amount of people in the space. And so that said, there's just huge needs there. And the cool part about what we'll be able to do is just connect with people on the streets. There's one of my favorite things about the culture is the middle of the day, which is the hottest part of the day, and everybody has. Do you guys know what it's called? Siesta, right? Like, I think Americans should have siesta. Everyone should just take an hour to 2 hour nap right in the middle of the day. Okay, but yeah, right? Exactly. You can clap for that. But it's part of the culture because a lot of the people start their day really early and they burn the candle at both ends. And so, like, the middle of the day, they have this, hour to 2 hour break right in the middle. And that, to me, is my favorite time of day. When I was an intern under Jim Carlton, that was the best time of day for me because though it was hot and nasty, and I got a lot of sunburn when I was there, like, white guys burn real bad down there. So I'm definitely going to need to invest in sunscreen. I might, move some stock into, like, the suntan lotion people or whatever. But anyway, regardless, that's the best time of day because a lot of people, they don't sleep, but they'll just rest in the shade. They kind of sit off in the shade, read books, hang out, eat their lunch. And guess what? They're just sitting there. They don't want to get out of the shade. So when you get
Cole goes and wakes them
so then
up.
I go and wake them up, or I come sit next to them and I open God's Word, and it's super fun because people are very warm to that. I also, you guys have heard it said in our culture, people pull the race card when it suits them, and being a white guy in a brown culture, I get to pull the race card, which is super fun because being a white person automatically makes people think that you're like this upper class. Like, they don't know that you're a broke missionary. They just assume that you're some fancy business person or something. And so to go sit with the common people, they're very warm to that. They're like, holy cow, why is there a white guy sitting down to talk to me? And that, I love to exploit that because, there's not many places in the world you get to do that.
True story. So yeah, what Cole said, just kind of to taper off and give you just a vision of what our heart is as we go down there. Our desire, once I get through language school, he's fluent. Right now at our church, he does. He says he's not fluent, but he live translates the services at our church in Spanish. So I think that takes fluency. Anyways, what we'll be doing in Lima, Peru, our heart is just for church planting and just to continue to raise up leaders through not only through just the gospel, people getting saved as the Lord wills, but through discipleship as well. And just Cole's heart for raising up national leaders to go out and to be church planters. There is a lot of unreached people groups in Lima, Peru, especially as you go forward or through up into the mountains, which is where you eat eyeball soup, if you heard that this morning. There's a lot of areas that are unreached, and so our heart is to train up national pastors to go up into those areas, to take the gospel there. And something that we also love about Peruvians is, unlike Americans, they can go to places in the world that Americans are not welcome into. So we also desire to see Peruvians to go out to other places in the world to spread the gospel where we can't go. So.
Yeah, America has been a great baseline for years and years to send people into Africa, into South America and Central America, and even up to our Canadian friends up north and over to Europe. Are you Canadian? Yeah. Woohoo! Yes. We'll talk later, eh? Yeah. So, but the cool thing is that, it's really cool that Americans have been able to do that, and God's uniquely blessed us to be able to send into those places. But there's also places that are like, there's a ton of red tape to get into. It's not that we don't send Americans into closed nations, but it's very difficult, and it's always under the guise of like teaching or starting business or whatever it is. And typically, there's a ton of red tape, and it's scrutinized because these countries have picked up on the fact that, we're more or less sneaking missionaries in to reach people for the gospel in closed countries. And what's really cool about Peruvians is they're not necessarily a world power, and they're not really a threat to anyone. And so a Peruvian national who loves Jesus and desires to take, I was just talking with the guy, he at the church there in Sol de la Molina, and his name is Juan, and Juan is of Asian descent. So you can kind of tell he's like half Peruvian, half Asian, and he has a strong desire to carry the gospel to China. And so he's in the process of learning Mandarin right now. And for an American missionary, holy cow, there's a ton of red tape and cost involved. For this guy, I said, how hard is it to get over there? He's like, I go there and back anytime I can, like as I'm learning Mandarin. And, plane tickets aren't that bad from Peru to China, I guess. And so it's really just an open door for the gospel. And so our goal is to impact an area that not only will be a launching pad for ongoing church planting in the area to kind of fill up that void where the gospel is missing in Lima, but also to, God willing, help equip missionaries from that country to be sent to places that we can't go. Yeah, so that's it. Daniel asked me to share our ministry and then do some Q&A, and so I'm game for Q&A, Daniel, if we've got time for it. I'm not sure what your time frame is. I got 10 minutes? Okay, I got 10 minutes. Q&A, what do you got? Yes?
Can you tell us the story of how you adopted your children?
Well, we're in the process of adopting our children. So our younger two, we're foster parents as of almost 5 years ago. And we've had Tate since November of 18, right?
He was 5 months old.
Yeah, so he was 5 months old. His sister wasn't born yet. And she was born April 1st of 19. And so we got Tate, and we fostered him. And we walked through the process of, the whole point of fostering, according to the state, is to attempt reunification with the biological family. And so after a period of time of that, reunification was not a possibility. They terminated parental rights on Tate, and now they have gone ahead and terminated parental rights on Ren. And so we have just entered within a month ago into the adoption phase with these two. And so that's why you don't see them on our prayer cards. It's not because we don't love them. It's not because they're black, okay? It's because the state simply will not allow us to have them as any type of public facial recognition with our family until we've finalized that adoption. So we anticipate that taking about 6 months from right now, and that should work out hopefully well for what we think our time frame is for heading to South America.
You can just pray for that if you ever think of us. We've been told by the lawyers that the adoption department in Iowa is a hot mess right now. Those are the words that we were given. So just maybe that would come to fruition as the Lord's perfect timing. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Other questions? Yes.
So you're going to go down and join the ministry that exists down there now.
Yep.
Alongside. What does that ministry look like today?
So today, I actually just preached at that church this last week, and so we literally just got back Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? Monday.
Something like
yeah, it was something like
that.
it was a blur. It was at nighttime. So, anyhow, that church right now. So Steve and Kelly Frericks, as Daniel had mentioned, their church planning. They have a church planning ministry. Over the last 30 years of their ministry, they've planted 3 really healthy gospel-centered churches. And the one they're working on right now is church number 3. Has about 140 believers. And they have actually, from that church, planted another church already. And so they sent a core group out from that church to plant another church. And so that's really exciting, and that's kind of Steve's heart right now. The reason that we're going to go partner with them, at least at first, is for the purpose of helping him with his church planting efforts. Steve is a phenomenal evangelist. God has truly, truly blessed him. While we were there for 2 weeks, he and Kelly led 5 people to the Lord. And so, and that's just kind of the rhythm of their ministry. Like, it's a rare month when they don't have people coming to the Lord and being baptized. That said, he has this huge void for discipleship, and he needs people to help him with that, because discipleship doesn't happen at a moment in time like salvation does. It happens over a period of time. And so that's where the equipping comes in. So while Debbie's going through language school, I will be able to partner with Steve and assist him with that. Now, once Debbie's out of language school, I think our heart and desire is to kind of see where God places us. We strongly desire to be involved in church planning in some way, shape, or fashion. So whether that is we head out to the next spot as the lead church planter and family, or whether we come alongside a Peruvian and help plant a Peruvian specific led church, and assist with that effort. We're certainly equipped to do that as well, and then also just helping Steve and Kelly bear the burden of discipleship as well is going to be a huge thing in the early years. So I can't promise you what 20 years is going to look like, but the first couple of years while we're doing the language school thing is going to be huge.
And learning. We have a lot to learn yet.
Yeah. Believe it or not, did you know going from business negotiations to being a lead pastor is not a direct translation? Did you know that?
We have a lot to learn.
Yeah, so we have a lot of growing to do in that.
It's a blessing to be able to go and work with seasoned people who've been doing this for a while, because I think we're just going to be blessed that way to be able to pick up a lot. So
Yeah, and hopefully not do a lot of really dumb things. So
I can't promise that.
others? One more? Yeah.
I'm concerned about the finances. You have lots of extra people into the world.
Yeah.
You got a big family. You're going overseas.
Uh-huh.
Do you have an idea of how much it's going to cost to bring a family
Yeah.
from the United States overseas to Peru?
Yeah. No, I know. I actually know exactly those figures. So those figures are a little bit deceiving, but basically there is a need for a salary, so I can, be a dad, put a roof over a head and food on the table, and then beat my. No, I'm just kidding. Not beat my wife. But sorry, that's a terrible joke.
That was a terrible joke.
That's a terrible joke. But anyway, regardless, there is a need to do that. And so there is a salary involved with what we are raising in support. There's also ministry funds as well. So it's not as drastic as you would think, but the city of Lima is a city of 10 million people. So it's not Iowa. The cost of living from a housing and a transportation standpoint is extremely expensive. So, to live in land, I was telling one of the guys after church, like land down there, I looked at a 1/4-acre lot while we were down there, and that 1/4-acre lot cost $200,000, and that was an average 1/4-acre lot. And so just to, and you're like, holy cow, you can buy like a lot here in the city of Des Moines with a house already on it for way less than that. And so there's a reality that I'm going to be renting because rent is a lot less than buying. But yes, as far as numbers go, our support need is approximately $9,000 a month. About half of that amounts to a salary. About a 1/4 of that amounts to being a foreigner, and so needing all of these additional visas, insurances, what if I get shot kind of stuff, like that's a real thing. And then the other 1/4 of that is just purely ministry costs. It's the ability to do the ministry, boots on the ground, to meet with people, to host events, to help transport people, to buy a vehicle so I can pick people up and do life. And so there is that reality as well. And so unlike doing a church plant here in the United States like we did from Saylorville to South Des Moines, where there was like 20 core group people that came and funded that effort, we're going just the 2 of us. And so there is that uphill battle at first, and then also the goal is to plug in, do the work of the ministry until God would lead us to the next spot, and then do it all over again. And so Lord willing, he'll bless in that effort. But yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, it's not the cheapest endeavor in the world, I can tell you that.
But the Lord is good, and I look at that number, and that is a small number to the Lord. So we're at 30% support, yeah?
Yeah, we're currently at 30%. We started about
End of October?
end of October, so about 3 months ago, and God's been really faithful. We've gone to several churches already. Some of them have picked us up, some haven't, but even in the churches where they haven't picked us up, there's been several individuals that said, hey, I want to support your ministry for X amount of dollars a month. And we have individuals that support us everywhere from $5 a month to, I met this business guy and he's supporting us at like $500 a month. And so God's been really good just to give us that range. I got this teenager that's like, hey, I've got $5 a month. And I'm like, praise the Lord, that's awesome. That's cool. Because we want people to feel like they can just partner with us and receive the joy of knowing that we're doing gospel ministry together. Like, it's not just us, it's also the church, it's God's people that get to participate in the joy and the eternal reward of seeing people come to know Jesus in South America. You got time for one more? One? Yes. Oh, okay. Well, we were thinking about not educating them at all. No, I'm just kidding.
I can answer that. That was actually something we were looking into as we went down there. There is currently a missionary kids school down there that is shutting down. So as we explored our options, homeschool is the option for us. So at present, if the Lord has something else, he will have to show that to us. So, which is fine. We're actually homeschooling our 6-year-old this year. Hope it's going okay. It seems like it.
How's it going, Liam? You learning your words? Yeah.
So hopefully that'll be a good transition. Right now, that's our plan for education, and we'll see what the Lord has. So.
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Pastor Daniel.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
All right, well, thank you, Cole and Debbie. If I could have a couple guys come forward for the offering. And Tim, if you could come lead us in a final song. Perfect. Oh, yes, brass.